If you were facing murder for hire charges in the feds and two of your best friends were cooperating, what would you be doing? Would you be happy?
No, I'd be crying.
Lil Durk has been sitting in federal custody waiting for this moment. And today, August 20th, jury selection is scheduled to begin in one of the biggest criminal trials hip-hop has seen in years. Federal prosecutors are accusing Durk of something extremely serious.
Shot and killed after a deadly fight erupted in front of Monaco Hookah Lounge. Two men approached King Von and his group in the parking lot, and an argument ensued. The argument quickly escalating to a shootout between the two groups. Rapper Maximilian says he was there when it all went down.
It was like a lot of chaos. You just heard the shots ring out. It was like rah, rah, you know what I'm saying? There was a few people moving around, but at the same time, like, with stuff like that, you're trying to get out the way because you're trying not to get hit.
Believe it or not, this all playing out right in front of two Atlanta police officers.
One of them was actually inside his patrol car or next to his patrol car with his blue lights on.
They say after King Von was killed in Atlanta in 2020, Durk wanted revenge. They allege that revenge eventually turned into a murder for hire plot targeting rapper Quando Rondo. But Quando survived. His cousin Surveyor's Robinson, also known as Lil Pab, was killed. And prosecutors say that the man behind the alleged plot was Lil Durk. But here's where this case gets interesting, because the question isn't whether Durk knew these people. It isn't whether there were tension between these groups. And it isn't whether Durk made angry music after King Von died. The question the government ultimately has to answer is much more specific. Can they prove Lil Durk actually participated in this alleged murder for hire plot? Because over the next few weeks, jurors could hear rap songs, music videos, text messages, social media content, interviews, and cooperating witnesses. And Durk's lawyers are going to argue the prosecutors are taking pieces of his life as a rapper and trying to turn them into evidence that he ordered a murder. So today, we're breaking down what evidence prosecutors are preparing to show this jury, and why this case might come down to one question: where does the image of Lil Durk, the rapper, end, and the government case against Durk Banks begin? To understand this trial, you have to go back to November 2020. King Von was killed following a confrontation outside an Atlanta nightclub involving people associated with Quando Rondo. Von and Durk weren't just fellow rappers. They were closely associated through Only the Family, also known as OTF, and Durk repeatedly spoke publicly about losing Von. Federal prosecutors allege what happened next went beyond grief. They claim Durk and others eventually participated in a plan to retaliate against Quando Rondo. Fast forward to August 2022, Quando Rondo and his cousin Lil Pab were outside a gas station in Los Angeles. Gunfire erupted. Quando survived. Lil Pab didn't. And according to federal prosecutors, this wasn't some random shooting. They allege members of OTF traveled to California as part of a plan targeting Quando Rondo. And eventually investigators started looking at something bigger. Who allegedly sent them? That's where Durk enters the government's theory. Prosecutors allege Durk was involved in organizing and financing the plot. Durk denies it, and he has pleaded not guilty. And that's an important distinction throughout this entire video. The indictment tells us what prosecutors believe happened. It does not prove that it happened. That's what this trial is for. This is something I always try to separate when looking at these cases. There's a difference between a story that sounds believable and evidence proving that story beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecutors essentially have to connect several points. King Von dies. There's allegedly a motive for retaliation. People allegedly associated with OTF travels to Los Angeles. Quando Rondo is allegedly targeted. Lil Pab is killed, and prosecutors say Durk was connected to the alleged operation. But a jury can't convict somebody just because these evidence can be arranged into a compelling timeline. The government has to establish the connection. And that's why the evidence the judge has been deciding on before a trial matters. One of the biggest pretrial fights involved Durk's song, Pissed Me Off. The song was released in 2021. That's important because the Los Angeles shooting happened in August 2022. So the song predates the alleged murder for hire plot's fatal shooting by months. Durk's attorneys tried to keep the song and music video away from the jury. The judge ruled prosecutors can use them. But here's where we need to be precise. The judge allowing the video into evidence does not mean the judge determined the lyrics are true. It means prosecutors convinced the court that the material is sufficiently relevant under the rules of evidence to potentially be shown to jurors. The government argues the song and video provide context for Durk's alleged motive following Von's death. Durk's defense sees it very differently. They're essentially saying, you're taking artistic expression and trying to transform it into a confession. And it creates a fascinating question. If an artist talks about retaliation in music, how much of that can prosecutors legitimately use to explain what they believe happened in real life? Because that's going to matter in this trial. And this might be one of the strangest pieces of evidence jurors could see. A federal judge has ruled that prosecutors can introduce an excerpt involving Tekashi 6ix9ine commenting about King Von. Prosecutor had also fought over material connected to DJ Academic's interview involving 6ix9ine and Wack 100. Think about how unusual that sounds. We're talking about a federal murder for hire, and now old hip-hop internet content is becoming potential courtroom evidence. But once again, the important question isn't, was somebody disrespecting King Von online? The question is, what does that prove about Durk? Durk's attorney have alleged attempts to connect him to material they say prosecutors cannot establish he even saw. That's exactly the kind of distinction jurors are going to have to make. Something can provide context. Something can make a story understandable. But it doesn't necessarily mean it proves a defendant participated in a crime. And I don't want this video to make it sound like prosecutors are walking into federal court with nothing but YouTube videos and rap lyrics. That's not accurate. Reporting on pretrial rulings indicates prosecutors also intend to present things like phone and location evidence, text messages, a 911 call, witness testimony, travel-related evidence, and other communications prosecutors believe help establish how the alleged plot operated. This is where the case becomes much more serious, because music can be debated, interviews can be debated, but if prosecutors can establish communications, movement, money, or instructions directly connecting Durk to the alleged operation, that's a very different conversation. And that's what I'm going to be watching for when this trial actually starts. What's the strongest direct connection to Durk? Not OTF, not Von, not somebody Durk knows, but Durk himself. There's another part of this story that people might miss. Prosecutors recently added separate racketeering related allegations involving alleged OTF activity. Durk's attorney fought to prevent those newer allegations from being tried alongside this murder for hire case, and they won. Judge Michael Fitzgerald severed those charges, meaning they will not be tried together in this proceeding. That's significant because imagine being a juror and hearing allegation after allegation after allegation involving completely different events, at some point, there's a risk jurors stop asking. Did prosecutor prove this particular crime? And start thinking, there's so much smoke around this person that something must be true. Our legal system isn't supposed to work like that. Durk has to be judged on the charges and admissible evidence actually before this jury. The government can pursue the separate allegations later, but for this trial, the judge drew a line. Here's what I'm watching. Forget Durk's celebrity for a second. Forget whether you believe everything rappers say in songs is real. The government's challenge is pretty simple. Connect the dots. If prosecutors say Durk ordered this, show the jury how. Who received the instruction? How was it communicated? What did Durk allegedly provide? Who can independently verify it? What physical or digital evidence backs that person up? That's what matters, because association isn't enough. Being angry isn't enough. Making aggressive music isn't enough. And knowing people accused of committing crimes isn't enough. At the same time, the defense can't simply say he's a rapper, everything is entertainment. If prosecutors produce independent evidence connecting those statements to actual actions. That's why this trial is interesting. Both sides are going to try to tell jurors how they should interpret that exact same world. The government will say, look at everything together. The defense will say, they are combining unrelated pieces until they look incriminating. And somewhere between those two arguments is what actually happened. This is another area I'm watching closely. Prosecutors are expected to rely on cooperating witnesses. And whenever that happens in a federal case, I immediately have two questions. What does this person claim to know? And what does this person get in return for cooperating? That doesn't automatically make a cooperating witness dishonest. People involved in criminal activity can obviously have firsthand knowledge of criminal activity, but jurors also have to evaluate their incentives. Are they hoping for a reduced sentence? Were they involved themselves? Did their story change? Can prosecutors independently verify what they're saying? If someone takes the stand and says, Durk told us to do this, that's obviously powerful testimony. But then I'm looking for the next layer. What backs it up? A message, a call, money, travel, another witness, something? Because that's how you separate an accusation from corroborated evidence. And that brings us to today, jury selection. It sounds boring compared to opening statements or witness testimony, but imagine trying to find jurors for this case. Lil Durk isn't an anonymous defendant. He's one of the biggest rappers of his generation. King Von has an enormous following even after his death. Quando Rondo has his own audience. There have been years of YouTube documentaries, TikToks, Reddit threads, rap blogs, tweets, lyrics being analyzed, people declaring Durk guilty, people declaring Durk innocent before they've heard one day of evidence. The court now has to find jurors capable of putting all that aside. That's not easy, because this case already has a public narrative. The juror's job is to determine whether the evidence proves the government's narrative. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. Jury selection is scheduled to begin August 20th. Current reporting says opening statements could begin as soon as August 21st. And that's when we would finally get something we've been missing. So here's a question I'm leaving with y'all. How much weight should a jury give a rapper's music, videos, and internet world when prosecutors say those things help explain a real crime? Should they matter if independent evidence back them up? Or does bringing that material into a courtroom create too much risk that jurors start judging the rapper instead of the defendant? Because that's one of the biggest battles I'm expecting in this trial. And I'm going to keep following this case as the testimony comes out. So if you're new here, subscribe to the channel, because we're not just going to repeat headlines. We're going to separate what prosecutors allege, what the defense argues, and what the evidence actually proves. And once opening statements happen, that's when we're really going to see what kind of case the federal government has against Lil Durk. See y'all in the next one. Peace.